law. The law says 30 days notice. He didn't give 30 days notice. Now, it is true that he issued a signing statement, but signing statements are not law. Signing statements are the president's opinion about what the law should mean. Now, it may be that the law is unconstitutional, a violation of his power as commander-in-chief, but no court has held that. The law is on the books, and he didn't follow it.
All right, there you go. Jeffrey Toobin. I almost passed out when I heard that from him, and Jonathan Turley and others, but we go to the source. We go to Alan Dershowitz, and there's only one, and he's sitting right here. Alan, great to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for coming in.
Me.
We'll talk
Sure.
More about, of course, Taking the Stand, your great book, and a lot more. But let's start with this. Of course, the president, the administration apologizing yesterday to some senators for not notifying Congress as the law requires, 30 days notice before Gitmo prisoners can be transferred. Your take on whether or not the president violated the law?
Well, first, he should have notified Congress. There's no question in my mind that he should have done it. But I think a law which tells the president that he can't act in emergency situations when he sees a window of opportunity as the commander-in-chief to bring a soldier back would be unconstitutional. And he has the right to interpret the law in a manner that makes it constitutional. And I don't think we should be politicizing this issue. There's enough fault to go around. The problem of releasing prisoners in exchange with terrorists goes back to every president, practically. It goes back to what the Germans did when they released the killers of the Israeli athletes, what the British did, what the French did. If we could go back to square one and really agree with all the Western nations, never, ever negotiate with terrorists, never give them what they want, I think we could have put an end to terrorism. But you have to look at the broader context. Today, why are the Palestinians so popular in Europe today and at the United Nations? Because they use terrorism. Terrorism worked. The Kurds don't have a state because they didn't use much terrorism. The Tibetans don't have a state. Many other people don't have a state. Palestinians are getting a state because of terrorism. Terrorism works because we give in to terrorists. If we could start from scratch, I would say not an inch.
All right, but in our post 9/11 world, in our nation, this is the first time. I mean, the Bush policy, one of the Bush policies was we don't negotiate with terrorists. But this is the first time, and in the minds of many, this now puts a target on the back of all of our soldiers all around the world and Americans traveling abroad, because now the Taliban and other multiple terrorist groups see kidnap an American soldier and we could get people released.
Believe me, they're 100% right. I'll tell you about a fascinating debate that occurred in Israel a few years ago when women wanted to fly combat missions. And the Air Force brass said, no, not because you're not competent, but because if they capture a woman, the stakes are even higher. Because the fear of sexual assault. So the government said, no, we don't want women being captured. Fortunately, they went to court and they won, and they've been great combat pilots. But there's absolutely no doubt that the price of an American captive has gone up dramatically as the result of this. Look, the people who will be killed, if they are killed, as the result of this decision to release 5 people are nameless, faceless people. We don't know who they are. We know who this guy is. He has a face, he has a name, he has a father, he's been on television. It's very hard for any government official to resist trading a prisoner. Look at Netanyahu, who was the toughest guy when it comes to this, gave up 1,000 prisoners for Gilad Shalit. Why? I went to visit the prime minister. Before I can get into his house, you had to pass a tent in which Galit's family was sitting there every single day with pictures of this young man saying, save our son, save our nephew, save our friend. You can't resist if you have any heart, that kind of pressure. That's why the rules have to be firm. That's why there should be no discretion to give up prisoners in exchange for other prisoners or to negotiate with terrorists.
So you believe that a law maybe saying what you just said would be beneficial?
I wish we could have an international law where the Europeans also were bound by it, that nobody should ever give in to any demand by a terrorist, no matter what. To quote the president, period, end of sentence.
You know, I never agreed with Israel doing what they did, and especially as part of the peace process, preconditions, releasing all those prisoners. But, you know, that aside, when they do it for remains of a soldier or for a soldier, it's usually attributed to the nature of the Jewish state, the Jewish people, which, you know, I think is separate from this. A lot of people applying or insinuating sinister motives to the president because they say he wants to close Gitmo. Congress won't let him close Gitmo. he's going to get everybody out of Gitmo, and this was the first step.
I don't think so. I think he genuinely felt the pressure to bring this guy back, and I think he's right about this. Look, I don't like what I hear about this guy. On the other hand, you can't make judgments in his absence. You have to presume him innocent. We can't make distinctions between the kinds of prisoners. Once he's back, we can ask some very hard questions.
And then you think, one other political question, you think Susan Rice was right or, again, wrong when she went on the Sunday shows and said that he served his country honorably?
Well, you know, I have compassion for Susan Wright. She seems to read other people's lines sometimes.
But she's now the National Security Advisor.
I know. Look, I don't know whether he served his country honorably. He may have a mixed record. He may have served it honorably and may have done something dishonorable. But I just don't think you make those kinds of decisions when you're trying to bring somebody back. But you have to look at this in context. What I'm worried about is the United States government is now dealing with terrorists. They're going to make a bad deal in Iran, it looks like. They're forcing the Israeli government to deal with Hamas.
Yeah.
It's all part of a picture of a soft foreign policy. The Obama administration seems to today be more willing to talk to terrorists who are trying to kill us than to Israelis who are trying to help us.
And also, if you want to take it politically again, John Boehner and the Republicans were terrorists holding a gun to our head, holding us hostage. I will not negotiate with them. Yet he did with the Taliban. But let's talk about Israel, and let's talk about the unity government. I mean, just when you think things can't be topped, on the heels of this, on Monday, they announced that the U.S. does, the State Department does, that we're going to give money, continue to give money to, and talk to, and work with the unity government, which, as you rightfully said, includes now Hamas.
And there is a law. The law that Congress passed does say you can't fund the Palestinian Authority if they're unduly
So would this
influenced.
be breaking the law?
Well, the question is, how do you interpret unduly influenced? And, you know, we have another law in the books, a law that says you cannot do anything to help a group that's listed as a terrorist. And Hamas is listed by the United States government, by several European governments, as a terrorist organization. I think that the United States should have done what it said it was going to do. Hold back, wait, see what happens. Maybe this is an opening. Maybe the Palestinian Authority will have more influence in this technological government than the Hamas, and then there's time to work with them.
Go right off
to
the bat.
Jump into that in violation of what seemed to have been a commitment to Israel, I think sends the wrong message.
Now, you know Bibi Netanyahu a lot better than I do. And by the way, if he ever wants to be interviewed by me, please let me know.
I will probably see him soon.
Okay.
Right?
I did interview him when he was Prime Minister the first time when I was at WABC. Anyway, he's outraged, rightfully so.
Yeah.
People in Israel, they feel that they're being stabbed in the back continuously by this administration, though.
Well, you know, they've been stabbed in the back by many administrations, both Republican and Democrat, and they always bounce back. I think most Americans, individual Americans, understand that we have only one reliable ally in the Middle East.
The polls show that, yeah.
And we should be supporting Israel's security. We should be supporting their diplomatic possessions. The only way they can make peace is from a position of strength with strong American backing and support. I think the Obama administration is upset because they expected that they could pressure Israel into making a peace that wasn't in their interest to help bring about the peace process. That didn't happen. And there's a little bit of score evening going on. That's a mistake. I think you have to keep Israel strong in order to encourage it to make peace, in order to keep the alliance between the United States and Israel. Remember, that's a mutual alliance. Israel helps the United States so much with intelligence, with technology. It's a mutual situation.
Right, so when Israel sees the so-called Arab Spring, sees the U.S. on the side of the Muslim Brotherhood, sees the U.S. on the side of the terrorists in Libya, ousting Gaddafi, sees the U.S. on the side of arming the rebels who are trying to oust Assad, who, if they succeed, we're going to have an al-Qaeda state right there, on and on and on, and sees, you know, talking to the Taliban, supporting Hamas, and we haven't even mentioned the word Iran yet.
Right.
What are they supposed to think, that Obama is going to do what's in the best interest of Israel when it comes to Iran?
Well, you know, as Elie Wiesel once said, always believe the threats of your enemies more than the promises of your friends. Israel has to become self-reliant. It has to be able to deal with Iran on its own terms if it becomes necessary to its survival. What I'm afraid is that the United States may be pushing Israel into a situation where it has to take unilateral act. That would be too bad. I think it would be much better if the Iranian situation and the regional situation could be resolved without any military action.
And then the U.S., this administration would be the first to line up against Israel for doing so.
Well, you know, this administration has said that it would never undercut Israel's security. I think Iran is the testing ground. What I'm very worried about is that the administration may make a deal with Iran, which Iran agrees not to build a nuclear bomb during the Obama administration, and then creates the potential for beginning to develop it once this administration is over. And that would not be a responsible act.
Yeah, no, not at all. All right, so let's talk about the book, a great success, Taking the Stand, My Life in the Law. We've talked about it a couple of times on this show. I mean, you know, again, you know, people sometimes, when they reach a stage, but you're not finished. I mean, this is your life in the law, but you're here, you're active, you're continuing your life in the law. So, I mean, what makes you decide at some point to write this book before you're finished?
Well, 50 years of teaching at Harvard Law School. I turned 75 years old. My 30th book, and I was really ready to set out how I win cases. I have a very special tactic for winning cases using science, and I've had 38 homicide cases and won the vast majority of them by using science. So I tell those stories. The cases are fascinating.
Oh, absolutely.
The people I've represented, presidents, prime ministers, actors, celebrities, billionaires, it's, you know, very interesting. I just wanted to share it all with my readers.
And the law today, how has it changed? I mean, did the O.J. verdict dawn a new era, a bad era, you know, jury nullification, all that kind of thing? Was that a changing point?
There were a lot of changes brought about by the O.J. case. First, juries demand more and better scientific evidence today. You know, O.J. also stimulated a bunch of television shows about blood splatter evidence and that kind of thing. So juries expect more from prosecutors. It, of course, exposed the racial divide in America. That verdict produced a terrible, you know, cheering by some, booing by others. Even my mother was furious at me for having played a role in that. She called it the Oy vey OJ phase of my life. You know, that was important. I think we're seeing science playing a far greater role. New DNA evidence is resulting in vindications of people who have served long prison terms. We still have too many innocent people in prison and too many guilty people escape. Our system has not been calibrated well enough. And in the book, I propose various changes that I think can be made to increase the accuracy of the system.
You believe in overall tort reform? You think we're too litigious, not criminally speaking, but too litigious a society?
I think we have to have tort reform, but it has to be very calibrated. We have to still give people the right to bring lawsuits, even if they don't have the money and the resources to bring them against corporations. So I favor the contingency fee, but I don't think they should be as big as lawyers. Lawyers today can win a case. They collect millions of dollars, and their clients collect nothing.
Right. When
There's
all is said and done.
Wrong with that.
Do you watch a case? You still watch, and you say, "Man, I wish I was on that case."
Right. Yeah, oh yeah, sure. Every so often I see a case, but you know, then the phone rings and I'm on the case. The guy calls, he's lost.
They're not
calls me on
stupid,
appeal.
right?
Look, the Ukrainian thing. I'm now involved in a case over there. I'm involved in a case. I represented the former president of the Ukraine. I've consulted on the case against the Prime Minister of Pakistan. So I'm right in the action.
Taking the Stand, My Life in the Law. Thank you, Alan. Great to see you always.
pleasure.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. All right, folks, the great Alan Dershowitz. And when we come back, we're going to talk about all of this and the latest developments, of course, and revelations, the release of the Taliban video, and much, much more on the Malzberg panel. You know it, you love it, you got to have it. Coming back on the Steve Malzberg Show.